Welcome, everybody, to our April webinar from Mortarstone. I'm Dwayne McNally, and I'm the host today, and excited to have you guys here with us today. And I'll introduce my co-host here in a moment, Tammy Bunting, but just want to say, as you're coming on, as we go through the webinar today, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A or into the chat, and looking forward to a great conversation today with Tammy. So, Tammy, I'm going to have you come on and just do a quick introduction of yourself, kind of some of your history and background, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. This is a topic that I challenge myself with all the time in regards to how do we utilize a budget and be able to really determine the health of our church through the giving and get a little bit more of a deeper dive into the giving than just an average gift per attendee. So being able to blend our budget with our giving metrics is something that I've always wanted to have more visibility into, and Mortarstone has built a part of their product, a module in their product that does that now. So we get to share that. I've been a CFO of multiple churches. I'm excited to be with you today and see what questions you may have.
Tammy, thank you. And as you said, you cut your teeth on ministry at a young age, like 5 years ago, and you've been a CFO and served in a lot of different capacities over the years. And just for anyone who's new joining, so for myself, I've been with Mortarstone for just over 2.5 years now. And prior to that, I served as an executive pastor at a large church here in the greater Austin area. And so we bring a lot of perspective to the conversation about budgeting, Tammy. And my guess is everybody in here knows how to manage the expense side. The question is that we want to put on the table today is how well are you doing at managing the giving side of the budget? And so that's the conversation that we're going to dig into. And so we're a quarter in. We're a quarter into the year. Now, whether or not your fiscal year aligns with the calendar year or not, the fact of the matter is the first quarter of the year is behind us, and we should be able to identify some of the trends and what's happening now as we move forward. So with that, let's move forward.
And Dwayne, I don't know if anybody else noticed if you froze for a minute. So.
All right. Well, Tammy, shouldn't be happening, but if it does, thank you, because I was going to say either I was freezing or you were freezing. So sorry about that, whoever was freezing. So what I was trying to say is, as an executive pastor and a CFO of churches, we bring a lot of perspective to how do we accomplish the budget, and the fact that we are one quarter down for 2026. It should be telling us something about what's happening in the giving in the church today. And so that's the conversation we want to tackle as we move forward. So Tammy, I'm going to let you go next.
All right. So just again, let's talk about what our conversation is going to be today. So we're going to look at how is our church giving, or how are we really doing once we finish that first quarter, being able to look back and be able to take the data that's in front of us and either feel really good or need to make changes. Are we tracking with our budget in giving? It would be great utilizing the Mortarstone application. You can actually budget using some of those metrics, maybe having those metrics as part of your budget. Now you can look at the metrics and the dollars to see how you're tracking. And it's all about ministry. Are we able to provide the resources needed? Those priorities in ministry, we want to make sure that we are managing our dollars well for the ultimate purpose of our ministry and bringing those to know and follow Jesus Christ. And that's where then it's not just about the dollars. It leads into discipleship and discipling the church through finances. What does it look like to understand your giving and to be able to ask the right questions so that it inspires the others that may have not they're not as seasoned givers as others. So we've got lots to talk about.
That's great, Tammy. So as we get started, let's ask the question, who's on the call with us today? So I'm going to launch a poll, and it's going to ask the question of what your position is. And so if you want to put that out there, and we recognize that some of y'all may actually fulfill multiple roles. And so please let us know. And that way we can make sure as we're talking, we're thinking through who's on the call with us. All right, Tammy, it looks like we have a few lead pastors, several executive pastors, quite a few finance directors, a couple stewardship pastors, and several people in church administration. So thank you. That's really helpful for us to understand. And so as we go, feel free to ask questions. And so we have one other poll that we want to ask. And that's just, let me share the results from that.
That's really good. This is going to be actually a great conversation for everyone. So I love that we're spread out. That's perfect.
And then the next question that we have is, when's your fiscal year start? Or what's your fiscal year? So if you want to tell us that. All right. So Tammy, the majority, about half, are January through December, so it aligns with the calendar year. A few that are September to August, July through June, and then a few others. Yeah. So awesome. All right.
Oh, that's helpful. Deal. Excellent.
So let's just forgot to advance my slide as I was doing the next one, but let's just go into the Q1 reality check. And I think, Tammy, one of the things that I know is true about the people on the call, we've got a little bit of information about who's on the call with us, but several of the people probably don't know what Mortarstone has in this conversation as far as our capabilities. And then there's others who are actually using it today. So as we go, no matter where you're at, we're going to be talking to help you figure out how to take some next steps in that conversation. So Tammy, let's talk about the Q1 reality check.
So it's always something, those that are on the finance team that are part of this, also those executive pastors and lead pastors, administrators, what drives the church is our ability to manage to the funds that have been provided. And we, at the beginning, before we start our fiscal year, we create a budget, we create the expectations of what we think our giving is going to be. And then we match that up with our expenses. Like Dwayne said, it's easier to manage to expenses because we can put in dollars that say, we're going to spend this much for this specific ministry. We're going to buy this many fish crackers for the nursery. We know those things. They're and if we bought more, we would know. When it's giving and we anticipate what could be happening based on what has happened before, sometimes in a period of time, that doesn't happen. We need to be on top of it, knowing. And so we're talking about looking at that first quarter and really comparing what giving is to budgeting, looking at our trends, looking at the assumptions that we already made. Now, for some of us, those assumptions are based on something at a very high level. When you're talking about giving, it could be an average gift per attendee, or it could be just a trailing 12-month average. It can be all kinds of things, but I've always said, and we're going to be able to show you, I want to know more, because when I've gone to a elder board or a board of directors, and these are businessmen that are asking me about my churn, and they're asking about what's the percentage of large donors, where are we at risk? Is our back door open? All of those things don't come in. You can't answer those with an average gift per attendee. So things like if in fact you've budgeted based on the December giving, and that giving, you needed to know what your year-end giving is expected to be from a cash perspective, because those funds could in fact be funding the next 6 months, or you put them aside for the low summer months. You need to know how are we performing in our months as we expected? And we don't want to have a false sense of security in not knowing the answer to questions. If we don't know answers, we could be showing something that's not as secure. Our giving may be up, but it may be due to a large gift or multiple gifts, something that may not carry us through on an ongoing basis. So we
And,
want to
and
look.
Tammy, I think that aligns with, I've told you multiple times, every month when the controller at our church came into my office, I always had three questions ready to talk about. One is, why did we hit it? Why did we miss it? Why we were up? Why were we down? So that's the one, why. The second
Mhm.
question is um, what's the trend line? What is this, a new trend line, or um, is this an anomaly? Back to the conversation about the one-time $50,000 gift for some churches would create a substantial anomaly. For others, it may not create an anomaly based upon the size of church. And then the third question was, what adjustments can we make? What adjustments should we make? And so the can is the fact of, are there opportunities for us to do more? And the should we make, are there things that we need to cut back on to align our expense side with our giving side? And so, for me, the giving side is so important in the conversation. I can easily manage the expense side. The giving side can be managed as well, but I have to understand what's happening in it to accomplish that. So Tammy, I think that's and that's really where the takeaway on your slide is all about. You can't lead forward if you don't know where you're at.
That's exactly right. And I think the last bullet speaks into what you're talking about, that real-time insight. I would be looking sometimes 30 to 60 days back.
Yeah,
You can't pull a lever fast enough if necessary, if the information you're looking at, as I would be reporting to you as the executive pastor, it's too little too late. I
yeah,
don't want to be in that position. So Mortarstone again provided me real-time data. So I was very excited about that.
awesome. So Tammy, let's talk about the fact that, so you're in the middle of it, and now you're like, okay, Q1 is over with. You're now looking at, okay, so this is the new trajectory for the year,
Mhm.
which is a true statement every month. You have to
Mhm.
relook at it. But talk about what it looks like to adjust. How do you respond? How do you lead through that?
Well, before I talk about adjusting, I would like to, for the lead pastors that are here, the executive pastors, those finance individuals, I have experienced multiple times where the lead pastor would want to have what you would call a stretch budget, that faith-driven stretch. And part of it is what they're driven. They're driven to bring people to Christ, to put them on the journey. So if you don't put those numbers out there, it's as if you're saying we're not going to accomplish it. So I never wanted to defeat or put this defeatist mentality for the leadership who felt that just because we put it out there, it's not, it's a faith driven. So I would absolutely have a conservative, what's expected, and then a faith driven. And we would know right away what levers, if this happens, we're moving into managing to the faith driven budget. If these levers happen, if these things happen, we've got to pull the levers and go back to conservative. So having, and I think, Dwayne, you've mentioned that, always wanting your financial person to put three options in front of them. So it's not
Yeah,
just a once and done, correct?
absolutely. And I think that's the piece that's, I think I've probably mentioned this to you before, Tammy. I totally agree with the faith-driven conversation. And typically, what I would ask the elders of our church to do is pray about what number they thought God wanted them for us to go ask and build a budget against, as opposed to creating a budget and then taking it into them. And that was a challenge. It's a challenge every time, but there is a faith component to this that is so important.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for me and for those that might have been frustrated that aren't in finance, meaning those of us in finance couldn't give good answers real time as to where we were in order for that lever pulling. And just if you hang with the webinar, we're going to go into Mortarstone and show you what I'm talking about in regards to what this system provided me to be able to give answers, accurate real-time answers. We talked about this already, getting those expenses, but actually comparing them to giving trends. Don't flatline it. Make sure that our how we're functioning can be funded. And again, everything is about that mission critical. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time for the right purpose. And if we aren't, we need to make sure we're diagnosing what the problem is, adjust, and then communicate. Talk about those levers. Let people know ahead of time. If this happens, we'll be able to hire that person in ministry that you've been waiting for. And when we can go back and say, we're ready, and they aren't wondering, the communication is so important.
Tammy, I think that's good. And I think the other thing that I would put into this conversation is the fact of, if you're a multi-site church, understanding what your giving anticipated numbers are from each campus is going to be extremely important as well. And so, Tammy, I know we're not going to jump into showing what it would look like from a campus perspective today, but recognizing that, I was talking to a church leader a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking, and he was leveraging our giving budget tool so that he could equip his campus pastors to understand and lead effectively in their campuses. And so it's important for the guy sitting at the top of the organization, but it's also important for people who have responsibility over each of the components of the organization as well. So, Tammy, let's talk about, this is a picture of it, but I know you also are itching to jump into the tool itself. So I'm going to stop sharing and let you jump into that, Tammy. So hang on just a second. And all right.
Okay, I'm going to share as well. And then let's go. Don't look at my desktop, anybody. All right. Okay, so right now, can you see my screen, Dwayne, where we're in the budget management?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so really, I'm in Mortarstone. And for those that have Mortarstone, right at the bottom of your menu bar, we now have something called budget management. And obviously up here, you've got your normal insights. We're going to flip over there in a minute, but I wanted you to see this specific portion of Mortarstone. Really, we're just going to go through this quickly. Obviously, deeper dives we can provide you later, but it's really easy to set the beginning of your budget. I've already got 3 examples here, but I just want to show you how easy it is to create that baseline budget. And again, this baseline budget is going to be what you have created based on your financials, but now we're going to be able to compare it to giving insights as well. So we click a new budget. Basically, you put your beginning of your fiscal year. You can do both 100% of actuals, 90% of actuals, so it can create a budget for you based on certain parameters. You can get a trend base on different years. You can go 3 years, 5 years to get what that trend has been, not just last year's actuals. And you can pick, like Dwayne said, you can pick in here, you can actually pick which funds, which locations. Most of the time, we're looking at just general funds. But once you've set that in motion, it will create a budget template for you. It will actually give you, based on what the parameters were that you picked, our target is less than or more than, it's created a target. So now you've got your 12-month budget already in play, and then you're allowed to go in and view each of these screens and make adjustments. I'm not going to go into that as a deep dive. I want to roll over because that's for a different demo. What I want to show you, what's most important for this specific webinar, is to show you what it looks like once you've created your budget and you're in your year and can look at how you're performing to the budget. which specifically for giving. There's not expenses in here. This is just your giving analytics. What it tells me right now into the period that I am, April, I'm ahead of where I thought I would be. Now, remember, I've gone through that template. I've put in all my budget. Again, if you're looking for a little demo on how that works, we can provide that to you, but that's already all been done. Now, I see an overview chart, bar chart right here. It tells me what my target was, what my actuals were for last year, and what they are for this year.
And Tammy, that's the difference between on what you're showing there is the first four are the months that are either complete or underway, and then to the right, then you see the what the target is, what the forecast is, and that forecast, Tammy, actually will adjust as the year goes on. So if a significant change takes place, then it will start to be reflected there.
Yes, this is real-time data. Yep. Giving, measuring against your specific target. I want to open up the current month just so you can see what it looks like in a current month. In a current month, you will literally see what your giving is every day. You're going to be able to see what your target is for the month and where you are so far. Here's the power behind the analytics embedded into the budget module, if you will. I not only see what giving is by dollars, I can see how I'm doing by core giving, top giving, and when I do my budget by dollars, it's already going to allocate to each of these segments what portion you typically get in each of these segments. So for example, when the budget was built, it targeted for top giving for this period to be 206. What I'm seeing partway through the month, real time, that I'm falling short in my top giving. Now, when I drill in, it's going to give me where things are changing from last year. What the trends were based on expectations, but what's changing? So you can see all of this information, what's happened to the gift average, the gift count, the total dollars, the households. It even gives me households, dollars, and gift counts over the last 4 years. So when you come to the board and they are asking the question, why, you actually have answers, not just, well, it could be this or it could be that. You can literally go in and explain why we are not performing as we expected. It could be timing of a large gift.
And Tammy, that's to your point. That's one of the things that I've seen multiple times is where someone gave on April 31st last year and they gave on May 2nd this year kind of thing. And so it could be that. It could be the fact of, and I've seen churches where one giver moves and that giver was one of the top givers and that throws everything off. And so there's a lot of different factors that could be in play in this, but it's the part that I love about this is I can very quickly start to analyze where is the gap at and and then I can start to analyze and potentially put in action steps to address that.
And further to that, Dwayne, the great thing about it is this is in the budget module, but you have all of your full analytics. So let's say what you want to dig a little bit deeper. You want to look at people. You don't want to just look at counts or, stats. You want to potentially go in and look at your giving by band. You want to actually drill into your band 5 and see, and I won't drill in here, but there would be individuals, names. And again, it's not, I know there's the debate between people, discipleship, and giving dollars. It's about understanding the dynamics, the demographics, all of those things so that we can plan wisely and be able to make the right decisions, ministry critical decisions, if in fact something has changed in our giving. But we're going to talk later in the webinar how this actually rolls into understanding discipleship. Maybe it could be, like we've talked about before, someone stopped giving who was a large giver that's dealing with an illness. It could be those kinds of things on a compassionate note. It's not always about the dollars, but the dollars will drive us into understanding answers to questions that we may not have if we didn't have this information at our fingertips.
And Tammy, I think it still points back to, and we've had this conversation before, and I love the fact that Martin Luther says that there's three conversions that every believer has to have. The first one is their heart, the second one is their mind, and the third one is their purse. And until God has all three, he doesn't have the person. And so discipleship and giving is so linked in that conversation. And so Tammy, scroll down once. And so you showed us a month that we were in the middle of April. Go into February, where February's the second month of the year, Tammy. So
thank you. Thank you.
So what you can see here is actually you if you look at a month that's complete, you can see we tell you where you ended the month. And so like top givers, actually they're overperformed against what the target was. And so back to the conversation we had earlier is potentially some of the large gifts came in earlier in the year than what was expected or not. And so there's a lot of those kinds of things that what the budget that we've built out here and the expectations are based on the previous 5 years of experience, taking some anomalies out of the highs and the lows out to create a better picture of what is expected. And so
I really like that you can actually look at those. If people start asking, what changed? Well, I have that right here. And again, if I need to dig a little deeper, I have the full analytics at my exposure as well.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Tammy.
Okay, great.
And then
what other month
and then
would you
let's look at a month that is yet to happen, Tammy.
Okay, that's where I was going.
All right. And I threw you backwards in time instead of forward.
You did. So in this scenario, we haven't hit July. So when you're building your budget, this is the same kind of screen that you get when you're building your budget. You're in that period where nothing has happened in the actuals yet. So in this scenario, when we created our baseline, it already created for us based on how we created. We probably did a trend or actuals or something like that. And it's also showing us the trends. So you're looking at a year trend, a 3-year, 5-year. How is our target playing out in those scenarios, if you will? It also tells us based on where we have been and where we're going, what our targets could be in our core and our top givers. Again, you have the same segmentation where you can flip between, but let's say we have determined that we need to change because of things that have happened in the first 1 or 2 quarters. This is where you can update your budget. You can actually tell it just by dollars. If you change this dollars, it's going to allocate appropriately across all the segments. You make your comments. So as we mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, there's nothing worse than not having an assumption available to explain why you did what you did. And those comments are on that front screen at any time. You don't have to drill into the month. You can see every month's comments. Those are the assumptions that we would have typically built in our Excel budget. We can populate them here. So again, as we're looking at our actuals versus budget, we can be reminded of why we budgeted what we did. So you've got all of this information. You've got your large gifts, your past, you've got a ranges, historical, averages. All of this information is available to you right from the screen. We're going to go back. We just drilled into July where we already have our budget and we can actually see all of the data that is surrounding July for multiple periods of times and our current targets to be able to, when the month appears, we'll be able to measure against that. But let's say we need to change and do a reforecast, we also have it at our disposal to make those changes mid-year.
Great.
Is there anything else you'd like me to show? Maybe I'll just quickly pop over here. There may not be any comments, but this is where all your comments would be, all of your assumptions. So let's say you're looking at your main screen, your page that you've turned to that has your bar charts. You can see those comments. There are some forecast line graphs that allow you to look and see where you're trending. And it will actually have, you've got normalized giving, you've got your trend. It will actually allow you to back out some of those anomalies, which we have, if it's 150% more than your trailing 12. So all of these things are going to be available for you to analyze very quickly where you are today, where you could be going. Now, again, the budget's not here. This is just information for you to look at in regards to forecasting and trends.
Great. So Tammy, let's go back. Stay right there for a second. Let's pretend you're coming into me, CFO, coming into to the executive pastor, and I'm going to ask you the questions of, so Tammy, why did we hit it? It looks like we're ahead of budget, but not a ton, but we're ahead. Why? Why are we ahead of budget?
Well, I would have looked at all of these periods and I would determine that our two main buckets, which would be core and top, are on track. We are performing. Now, I may say that I would have drilled in and said our participation is up, but I would go into analytics and look at my trailing 12. There's more information that I may look at to give those answers to those questions, but quickly I can see that we're on target for our large and core giving, which is the lion's share of what we get, and that I may see that first time givers are down. So again, I might say we're doing really well, but we're not engaging those first time givers. We could be doing better.
Okay. And so that's question one. The second one is, if you go back to the main chart there, what's that tell me about our trend line? And it looks like the trend line is roughly the same as what it was before. So, which would then say, my third question, what adjustments would you recommend? We're not running so far ahead that it would say that we should add more stuff. But we also see nothing that would tell us that we have to cut back either at this point in time. And so,
yeah, so the good news is we're moving in the right direction. I would not recommend, unless there was a dire need in one of those levers, if it was potentially a part-time child, someone who's in children's ministry that they desperately needed, you could say that would slightly change the overall impact, but we're in good shape to do that right now, but that would be the only one I would recommend. Those kinds of things, I would be looking at what was on the table and seeing what I've always want to protect those summer months. So I may wait until further into June to make some decisions unless it was a dire need, that kind of thing.
Perfect. Because I think that's the key thing is because of this, at least I would view this as, and I would have loved to have had this at my fingertips when I was in XP, because I would have been able to actually have even better questions to ask the controller when she walked in the room. So Tammy, thank you for walking through that and showing that. And I know Adrian asked us to get her some information on how she can do this in her Mortarstone account. So Adrian, I will get that off to you, or our team will. But anyone else who says, "Man, I'd love to understand that," please put that into the webinar chat page as well. So Tammy, I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll go back to the slide deck.
All right.
And so Tammy, as we left off, we were looking at this, and so let's just move on into the next piece, which is, you already talked a little bit about it, but discipleship and what that looks like, and how this budget work actually helps you drive discipleship. So Tammy, talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, and I think I can honestly say, as someone that's been in finance, I get buried in the numbers and the stats. And that's why I appreciate having conversations with Dwayne, because he always comes back to the person, not just the dollars and the stats. And I think what I have loved about the Mortarstone budgeting tool is that, let's say mid-month, we know that we are really experiencing something that we didn't expect. So I may raise my hand, but what should be the ask? Is it just, hey, we're behind budget? No, we should look at our ministry and say, what are we doing that would be proclaimed to those in the audience that haven't engaged in giving as God would intend? What can we do to inspire givers? So it allows the opportunity for yourself or lead pastor to say, you know what, we've really done a great job in the community doing X, Y, and Z. What if we bring that? We've done giving analytics, Dwayne, not just Mortarstone, but on what's happening in the millennials, right? What
Yep.
they want to give for a purpose. So what if our ask, we're not asking the right way? And so having this information in front of us, it could trigger us to actually ask versus wait a month and a half and say, wow, we should have asked about that in July, because that would have been a perfect time, that kind of thing.
And Tammy, I think, the thing that you call out is the fact of, especially when you move over to the other insights, you can actually put the time frame in to say, how are my millennials, how's the giving from the millennials versus the giving from the boomers? And do you have a messaging issue to a specific target audience in that regard? And so there's, like we said, love the fact that we can do this, but then you can go back into the insights and actually drill down to figure out, okay, so if my top givers, based upon age, is there a specific gap that I have in that conversation? So spot on.
Well, and the second bullet really jumps out at me because, we've grown up with the tithe and all of that, and I still wholeheartedly believe in the tithe. But the language for the younger people is they want to give to make life change, purpose, right? So the tithe and the language of what we say, we want to make sure that giving teaches discipleship. It's part of being a follower of Jesus Christ. But look at what it does in impacting the world for life change. It really, we have an opportunity to look at the data, the insights, and make positive moves towards the journey that some of the younger folks would be on. And again, it ties into telling the stories, connecting generosity to spiritual growth. All of this is one big package.
Well, and the key, and the bullet what I love about bullet number 2 is, we were never called to give from obligation, but from joy. And so, so we're called to be joyful givers, not obligated givers. But often, a lot of us have to start with obligated giving before we come to understand the joy of giving. And so it's a obedience versus vision conversation all the time. And I think it's a conversation that's both. But I think that, the key is the fact that, the takeaway here, as you point out on the slide, is we're not talking numbers to fund ministry. We're talking numbers to transform lives. And I think that's the key thing that in this is the fact that if we can identify opportunities to engage people in a discipleship conversation, because we look at the numbers through the heartbeat of discipleship instead of a ministry funding conversation, it changes the conversation substantially.
Absolutely.
So, and then Tammy, talk a little bit about what it means to drive leverage workflows.
Yeah. So segueing from the reality of knowing what your dollars are telling you. For example, we talked about our first time givers were down. Well, what do? Well, in Mortarstone, you can actually create workflows that will touch people. We need to be able to touch people. There was another stat I saw quite a while ago, Dwayne, that talked about a lot of first time givers might not be giving to what is the general fund, right? They
Yep.
may give to something else first. But that's where we have to make sure we continue that recurring gift right as they age, they become legacy givers. That really is our responsibility to keep encouraging and bringing it to their attention. So utilizing givers' journeys inside of Mortarstone. Um, I think having the you can't well, let me back up. One time a pastor said to me when I was in finance and I would be giving him the data, a month and a half, sometimes 2 months later, he says, I've been called to do ministry, but I have no visibility into the impact that I'm making. And I think some of that we are visual people now more than ever. We've got to be able to have things automated, segmentations that it's easy to see how we're performing and utilizing dashboards.
Yep. Yep. And and I think the key that I see throughout the conversation that we're having, Tammy, is the fact that, and this is where we all truly believe we can manage the expense budget, but but a lot of us don't believe there's anything we can do on the giving side. Yet the thing I know is many people will give their first time, but the likelihood that they're going to give the second time, unless they're thanked for their first gift, changes. The fact that some of the people that are in our churches have stopped giving, not because they're mad at the church, not because of anything else, but because life happens and they got distracted and or their credit card ran out and they've never been notified that they need to redo their recurring gift, whatever the case is. And so all those are opportunities for pastoral care and engagement, which allows us to actually see a change take place in the person as well as in the funding of the budget.
And Dwayne, what's so important is in church, those of us that have worked in church, and we hear it all the time. Oh my gosh, I am so busy and I really can't do one more thing. And I'm sorry, I can't get to that or whatever. That's why we have to have systems working for us
Yep.
because time is precious. And we, as ministry leaders and administrators, our time, we just are spread thin. And so you've got to have systems working for you as opposed to you having to do all of that legwork.
Well, and Tammy, the third bullet, aligning finance, communications, and pastoral leadership. The thing that I know is the fact that if you're going to have a rotation of giving moments and really impactful giving moments, that's going to take all three parts of the organization working together. So the finance team has to help through the awareness, the communications has to create the crisp, and the pastoral leadership has to say, yeah, let's go and let's have this conversation. And all that leads to the opportunity for transformed lives to take place. So, Tammy, I know we're just about coming up on the end of our conversation, and truly, if anyone has questions or anything, please put it into the chat or into the Q&A. But Tammy, what's something that people can do this week?
Well, I'm going to say one more thing before I get into that, but the very last takeaway, you don't need more data, you need clarity on what moves people. But I used to, in other sessions that I taught just from the finance, it's like we would always say, we don't need more data, we need insights. And I think it's so important that we don't drown ourselves in the data. We actually be intentional. So in this sense, I like bullet three, launch one giving workflow. Think about not all the data, but think about a process that can actually streamline our giving, something inside the system. Make sure that you've got your ministry aligned so that the giving and the budget, just go look and see if that's in alignment. And don't be afraid to reforecast, even in a positive way. What about that faith driven? How hard would it be to maybe realign partway through and say, we're not afraid to manage to the faith driven stretch? So I'll leave that with you.
Very good. So Tammy, one of the folks out here, David, asked the question: does Mortarstone have a range of noise versus real change, i.e., plus or minus 3 standard deviation to cover 95% of normal? Too often, he's seen a person get bent on change, but when time is spent to look at it, it's just random noise, as in people that give periodically, not monthly, weekly, are often some of the biggest givers. It creates a lot of busy work to run that down, but really adds so little real value. So basically, how are we going to help somebody remove the noise from the conversation?
Well, if I'm understanding it correctly, what I heard you say is that you spend time going down a rabbit hole that's not necessarily going to give a earth-shattering answer. Is that what I heard? And that
That's
that happens
that's
a
how I
lot?
that's how I heard it, Tammy. Is
Yeah.
that all of a sudden the budget's up $100,000 and you go run it down and you realize, oh, what it was is George actually gave his annual gift a little early or something along those lines. And so that's really, so one of the things that we've done in our tool is we've actually, like, that anomaly would not
Yeah.
be reflected in the forecast pieces that are there, because those are not, unless it's a repeatable, if it's not repeatable, it's not going to be a part of the ongoing conversation. And then really when those come in, what I find is I can go quickly into the budget tool and isolate down, okay, it looks like there was a couple extra large gifts here in this area. Let me, and then I can isolate that down in about a 5-minute conversation, as opposed to a lot of chasing on it. So the noise is going to be there. It's the question of how quickly can you
Yes.
address the noise, is what I have found.
That's exactly right. It's the time. Oh, trust me, I hear you. I mean, I can't tell you, just even going to a board meeting and then them asking me a question, these businessmen that are multimillionaires on the board asking questions that it's like, oh my gosh, I have the answer to that. Just give me about a week to find it. We don't want that. That's why this has been developed in order to bring something to our attention and then to be able to explain it very quickly and see what the impact is long term. So
Yep.
yes,
And Tammy, I can think of the times when the person in your role would have come into my office and I asked 3 questions, my normal 3 questions, and we would drill down just a little bit. And she would have to go off and spend 3 or 4 hours researching what the answer was, that to me right now I could do in about 3 minutes
yeah,
sitting at my desk. And so,
yeah,
and David, I think your comment back is it's definitely helpful to understand the reasons. Outliers have to be investigated and figured out. It's just a matter of how quickly can you bring that to
yeah,
closure. And so, Tammy, what we're saying is, hey, take a step this week of, relook at your giving side of the budget and say, are you on track or are you not on track? Are you adjusting as needed? And are there action steps that you can take, not just to address your expense side, but how do you address your giving side? Do you need to do a different giving moment than what you typically do? Do you need to do any those kinds of things? And then begin to talk about how do you actually lead through discipleship in this conversation. So Tammy, we've talked a lot about it. We've put it out there. this is a chance for anyone who's interested. Please just throw a note into the chat, send us an email at info@mortarstone.com, send me an email, dwayne@mortarstone.com. Would love to get you guys to actually take a step with this tool. Tammy and I put a lot into helping make sure this tool actually addressed what needs to be done for people sitting in the seats that we've sat in, and would love to dig deeper into that conversation with anyone.